be a fabulous event tomorrow for the UK Financial Crime Leaders Summit.
Bang for buck, this is the best event that we attend all year.
So for me, today's event exceeded all expectations, and I've been really, really impressed by the calibre of speakers. One of the things that I'm really super excited about is the developments of AI in the compliance space. And in fact, today I'm going to be speaking at the SIFS conference on AI and compliance. And one of the biggest challenges that I foresee, and again, I want to hear a lot about what you guys are doing within your organization, but I'd like to start with what I see as one of the biggest problem statements, in that before you can jump into even assessing your AI needs, you need to clean your data. You need to clean up, have one source of the truth. It makes me crazy. I also don't think anybody should be jumping into any type of increased automation without good MI. You know, you want to know what your top and emerging risks are in your current systems. Where are your pain points? Where are you overly spending on resources and you have inefficiencies and ineffectiveness because of the manual processes or ineffective automation? And also, last but not least, mapping out your existing tech framework. Because I see a lot of organizations, and you'll have seen this, they adopt tech based on regulatory issues or audit findings. And at no time, because of KPIs, people are driven to quickly close out the audit points in a specific timeline, which means in many cases, filling the gap with new tech without holistically looking at the front to end framework and actually thinking, could we do this more effectively before we even put the tech in? So I know that that's a big, big discussion point, but you're right on the forefront with clients on this. And do you see, when you go into clients, do they even understand to start with that data is the 101 of getting this right?
I love the introduction. Number one is, of course, you said it already, everything is data driven. If you do not get your data in, you end up like the Swedish Vasa ship after 1,500 meter went down, was discovered, is a good element for humankind today. At the time, the biggest disaster in the war of Poland versus Sweden. But the data cleansing, it's really the first part of it. So I always say in our world, we always talk about KYC, know your client. It's KYD, know your data. Absolutely. And you're totally right. If you don't have that, makes no sense. And more in particular, if you look in terms of how digitalization and AI programs are already run, today, only very few banks dispose still an own IT framework and an own IT provider within the bank. Meaning, today everything relies on partnerships with rec and fintechs. Now, you mentioned it already. Rec and fintechs, for instance, they come always from the data solution perspective. What kind of fancy thing you could do? Same like for me, I'm using my Apple iPhone, only certainly 10% of what it can, but it serves me perfectly what I would like to have. And sometimes if you go in these kind of partnership programs, the fintechs offer you like the holy grail, but at the very end, you're like, but how is that impacting my day-to-day life? How is that reducing my resources for compliance? How my resources or even my hit alerts get better? So that is sometimes that we are not in a balance in terms of what we would like to achieve. The fintechs are going for the solution. We are going like for the effectiveness, as you mentioned it. And last but not least, very often, especially if we are talking about AI projects, it's always something that will hit the whole organization on a life cycle end-to-end basis. It's not just you change something in the system, like in a car, you repair just one small element and then it runs. No, it will change completely. It's like you change from fuel to electro motor system. So you need to think about everything and to calibrate. Why I mean that? Because in such a project, you have stakeholder management. You have front people, you have business risk management, you have the IT services, of course, you have compliance, you have to align them. And it doesn't start only with the budget, but it starts in terms of where we are and where we want to go. And then the whole thing becomes critical. So, and last but not least, if we look on the client perspective, they do await the banks to move into this direction. Look, in terms of the younger generation today, they're using iPhones. They do not go to the subsidiary anymore. So they want to have a smooth, what we call the client's journey already embedded. So the expectation is there. The reality, however, far away.
Do you think from a regulatory perspective, and maybe this is kind of jumping again into the deep end, or you can also say it's not an area you want to talk to. I really believe, and my personal opinion is that the recent AI Act in Europe was very prematurely drafted and issued.
Correct.
Drafting and issuing an AI Act and legislation for an area that's still in its infancy, I think is counterintuitive to innovation and could actually force a lot of innovators to go offshore and move a lot of AI development outside of Europe. Are you experiencing that on your side? How do you feel that the Act has supported or indeed hindering what you saw as the initial stages of AI development?
Listen, I see it a little bit. In my times, there were still video cassettes on the market. Huh? So
in my time too.
we had VHS, Beta, and Grundig 1000. So two of them disappeared. Here, I think we are a little bit the same, meaning Europe has now done the first kind of throw in terms of what could it be from a regulatory perspective. But if you look on the other financial jurisdictions, they are moreover in the first follower situation. And that is where we are in the moment. So you need to defend already a situation. We all know technology. What was yesterday good is tomorrow already forget about it. So that's the question where they're going to. And so my view on this one would be to go either in minimum standards and not going too precise, because what you write as of today, you need then to correct, and what is written once in stone, it's difficult to get out. It's like getting a tattoo on your hand. But so I think
have you ever thought about getting a tattoo in your hand, Ralph?
No. I had at the time, but I did it with henna.
Like a kind of a love-hate thing.
Exactly. No, never. Even for my daughter's birthday, I didn't do this. So it's, and I think we're very proud as of today, because innovation would look nice at the age of 30 might be not so good at the age of 56 now. So I think here with innovation, it's the same. If you look back, you're like, how could we do this? We always have to learn from failures in our past.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you need to start from something. But I think the European Union is a little bit used like the basher in terms of, this is not the way that we want to go. And even if you look on the US part, they are still more over in white paper. So I think that's what we do normally in terms of, if you want to get something more documented and in a certain directional element, you start with white papering, or at least as well with reaching out to the experts. We live in Switzerland, so I have a huge advantage. We are very much accustomed in our democratic world that everything is subject to voting. And so the same whenever the Swiss regulator, FINMA, is coming up, every bank is involved in terms of what do you think, makes it sense or not. And of course, we're a much smaller market, but normally the outcome is much better.
It makes me laugh when you mentioned there about the tattoo. That seems like a good idea at the time. I always kind of joke about, when I was younger, everybody wanted those lower back tattoos of like a butterfly or something. But after 3 kids, it's more like a kind of a bald-headed eagle. It's evolved.
Exactly.
It's evolved into something you never thought you wanted on your lower back.
Exactly. Therefore, you have these kind of tattoo nightmares coming up, these kind of TV shows that are correcting it, which is a little bit like the old Chinese style, making out of something which is not purposeful anymore and bring it into a new colorful light. But it hurts.
Absolutely. So you actually then made me, I was just thinking there about something I was talking about yesterday, agility in building frameworks as well. And one of the things, I'm very, very conscious of is when we're implementing any type of, even before we're talking about AI and cooperation, but we're looking at any type of automation, you need to have agility in your roadmap for implementation, because you've said it yourself a few minutes ago. What is good today may be obsolete 6 months down the road. And if we look realistically at implementation timelines, roadmaps for implementation, we are looking at a 9 to 12 month window to get this in place, trained, to a point where we can step back and it can run itself with the respective trained persons internally. How do you ensure that agility in the roadmap so that the product itself is not static from an implementation standpoint and is continually evolving during the implementation process?
I love your question. It's about experience. And now I will certainly, we were talking about hurting tattoos. We will now hurt a little bit some of the technology providers, because agility within the bank means as well that you have a forecast of where you're going. And honestly, try to talk to the CIO in terms of what is the next 3 years look like. He will say, if I know it already until the end of the year, I'm the most happiest person in the world.
True.
So agility from a budget perspective, very difficult to get in terms of how much do I need and how much I need to adjust to agility in terms of a stakeholder management. Very difficult. We might touch upon that later as well, because it means as well a mind shift, a new setting of mind shift and expertise within the teams. Today, from a compliance perspective, you need more data scientists and analytic people that can contribute in terms of being the kind of lawyers on this one. Now, when it comes to the choice, I think in the storytelling part, I can only say our best choices were always providers that played a little bit the plug and play element, meaning that you do not go into too much licenses where you have already to pre-invest something and we know I'm stuck with this one for the next 5 years. It's like, and number two is very important. You need to choose your provider to the same size and mindset that you have. If you're a small bank, you will love providers that are boutique oriented. Why? Because you would like to call the CEO by saying, Guy, we really need your help tomorrow. We have a very important committee. It goes right or left. We need your presence here. Try to do this with the big SAP licenses or the big providers. Will not happen. And as well with regard to the solution, does not mean always that you go for the budget style, but you need to go something which is in line with how your bank or how your organization is built. And that I can say, so the plug and play model, meaning open sources, where you have then the possibility to say, I am the owner of the data. And I think that's what you mentioned in the beginning, rightfully, with regard to we need to have substantiate and the critical data sitting in the bank, regardless of in which tool I do it. And sometimes even we are aware that this is a tactical fix, as we call it, and we're looking for the strategic fix going forward. But you have to have clearly said that your tool that you're using, your tactical fix, is worth going forward, and that you do not have sink or lost costs, because if your provider is gone, your data is gone and your ownership is gone.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned there about diversity and skill sets. And it's something I feel like a broken record talking about this over and over again. I always joke that a team doesn't need 10 Oonaghs, and nor would you want 10 Oonaghs. One is certainly more than enough. But in the modern compliance department, you need healthy challenge and innovation doesn't happen unless you have healthy challenge. And in that regard, you need your regulatory SME. You need your product and risk SME. You need the engineers on the same page as well. You need your tech guys in the room, understanding data privacy, understanding cybersecurity. You also need management in the team and budget holders in the team. And bringing all of these people together will enable us to continually challenge each other with the evolution of whether it's financial crime typologies, or indeed the regulatory landscape developing, so that we are challenging the development continually of our frameworks. And what I'm seeing too many times, and maybe this is more a historical issue, is people have hired people like themselves. And that is a very, very dangerous setup. I know it gives people a level of comfort. I understand you. I know you. But you need to bring diversity of skill set and challenge yourself continuously in order to change that mindset. Exactly to what you said. When you're going in to speak to clients and you're seeing a team of basically, ex-auditors or ex-lawyers or, and you're sitting there trying to explain from a tech perspective what needs to be done, and you're just seeing glazed eyes. How are you helping them to understand the diversity change that needs to happen in skill sets for this to be a future-proofed success.
Yeah, it's I love this is the human touch and compliance, as I call it, and I think it's one of the most important parts where we see opportunities, but as well the biggest challenges. I come to that in a second. Now, talking to people that have a certain mindset because they're coming. I'm a German lawyer, by the way. I think I have developed into something more smart with an emotional intelligence part over time, but that was because when you're facing 10 times the problem and you're hitting 10 times the wall, you get headache. So sometimes you need to think in terms of how do I get around. Now, how do we get around with people that have this kind of monolistic approach by saying, don't have the experience, is just sometimes by hard facts. And so therefore you can always get to, if you look, for instance, on digitalization projects, there's a lot of bad examples going out there and you can bring that on the table. Why? And I think that's what we always need to do as well, the kind of failure analysis, why something didn't work out and how can we do this better. So it's, again, I think about the storytelling from our experiences, how we can do this better. Now, when it comes to already having and disposing a team that has that exactly what you mentioned, complementarity in terms of skill sets, you need to start already at a very early stage. And why is that so? Because the typical talents, what we need in terms of project manager and especially data scientists, they are already gone to other corporates, especially the fintechs, the regtechs, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Netflix, Amazons. They are more, they're more attractive. Why would you sit in such a gray zone bank if you can have Smarties and Coca-Cola all the time available for your drinks? I do not make any kind of publicity. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's the truth. So the battle for talent is something
sponsored by Coca-Cola.
exactly. No, so the battle of talent is something which is extraordinarily difficult in the moment, and as well in terms of what kind of trainings and education parts are proposed. But that needs really to change completely because ultimately, what you're looking at is always striving as well in a compliance culture. And the compliance culture is then exactly the part where these kind of processes will survive or they will die very quickly. And I think that is one of the most important part when it comes to this kind of understanding and talking on the same matter. But I have to say that I see even on, you mentioned auditors, even on the top 4 auditors, I see more and more as well people coming in that have nothing to do with the kind of typical legal background, but as well coming from more of economics or even from psychology, which is certainly good. So it's, I think even on this side, people get a little bit smarter by saying we need to get around differently.
What I've really, really enjoyed is the fact that this hasn't been it's kind of like a sales pitch in terms of AI and technology. Rather, the pain points are clearly there and you've clearly understood them. One of the things I really love that you touched on was EQ. And as you rightly said, having also trained as a lawyer initially, when you're and it probably has changed nowadays, but when you're at law school, it's all about the right. I'm so sorry, Charlie. It's first world problems. At law school, it really is about kind of the text and the theory, but success in the real world is about being able to understand people around you and communicate a message in a way that resonates with them. And in some instances, especially in banks, when you're working with a diverse skill set of people, you need to communicate one message in 10 different ways so that 10 different people understand that. Obviously, speaking about AI, which in itself is an area a lot of people are unfamiliar with, how are you positioning that discussion so it resonates and is understood by the majority within the room? And in some instances, are you having to bring it very much back to basics? Or are you seeing an increase in understanding of what AI can do in the banking space?
I love the question. Number one, I would invite people to have a look on my YouTube channel in terms of what AI means. But number two is moreover, I think AI is not ChatGPT, but ChatGPT provides already first insight and the first access to it. Now, the real truth to it is that sometimes people talk about AI moduled tools and AI enhanced tools, but it's not what is in it. I compare it to when I lived in France, when all these kind of A/B brand marked products appeared in the food market, which were biologic products. And honestly, if you looked on the ingredients, nothing to do. And that is sometimes the same what we have to face here, that tool providers, and sometimes because they have some kind of technical enhancements and they call it AI, which is absolutely not the truth. And being very honest, if you look on, let me say, name screening tools or transaction monitoring tools, sometimes the result with so-called AI product is not ridiculously better than with the already robotics or analytically framed tools 2 or 3 years ago. So there's still something ahead. Number one is, I think everybody needs to train him or herself a little bit on the topics. You need to read articles. Do you need now to go every time to Austin, Texas to see what are the newest hypes in technology? Maybe not. But I think it needs that everybody is trained a little bit on it and gets along with it. Otherwise, it makes no sense of doing so. But however, you need, whenever it comes to tool solutions, of course, the experts coming in. And I think one point which is really important, and we touched a little bit on the regulatory part beforehand, is it's not because you buy an AI solution that you're set with your problem. Meaning, now I have eliminated 80% of the false hit rate and I'm good in 2% of quality rates, etc. You need to be able to demonstrate to the regulator why your result is in line with your strategy, why your result is in line with your calibration models, etc. So the difficulty that I see sometimes with AI is it needs to be audit trailed and it needs to be avoided that it's a black box model. Huh? Because if not,
explainability. I think that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And that needs as well the right skill set on people that they can explain why this algorithm or whatever has achieved this result and why this result makes sense. So there is still and will be still a lot of translation processes, translation meaning from the IT world within the traditional world of banking and wherever this is sitting in compliance, risk management, or front. So there is a lot of these elements, and it's not because you have a CIO or CTO that will change, that this person is suddenly the God or the Buddha of AI in the bank. So I think it's a common process with us. I think same was when IT happened, or let me say 7 years ago, when the cryptocurrencies came across, where people had to think out of the box a little bit differently.
Yeah, I still remember a world when fintech was actually just another name for technology we're using in finance as opposed to regtech. And the next thing, fintech actually became a financial product in itself, a banking mechanism. So yeah, I think we're probably around the same age.
No, it's funny if you look a little bit on the development of fintechs, why they're successful, because at the time, 10 years ago, all the banks said IT department too expensive. We kick it out, we outsource it. Now, these people are still on the market and the need was still there. So the only thing changed, they were not in-house, but now external, meaning offering that and certainly scaling that for a lot of demands. But as you mentioned rightly before, and these people are as well normally software developer, data scientists. They love the solution. They do not love normally for what it is built. It's boring. If you can get a decision on a client in 10 seconds, less consuming, so what? You would like to make them discovering a new life where the bank would say, this is not of my interest, etc. So we have very often these kind of two confronting elements where one is going for the tech solution and the other one is going only for the effectivity and effectiveness in the process. And that sometimes as well needs a lot of debate and discussions before this is aligned. And what I always can say is, the funny thing is with kind of digitalization and AI projects, it's like Christmas and Easter is together. Everybody comes up with a lot of wishing lists, what they want to have. And so very often the whole projects get overloaded. So you need to have somebody smart on the project by saying, guys, this might be phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, or this is nice to have, forget completely about it. And as you mentioned rightly, it always comes with a vision. If you do decide that digitalization will bring you to the next level, then you should know already how your business should look like in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. And which is in today's market, that's a very, very difficult projection to make. Because as you rightly said, even the products that we're using today have evolved at lightning speed I could even say in the last 5 years in comparison to the last 100 years in banking. And the diversification, we've not seen, if I can say the word sexy, we've not seen anything sexy really in the market since 2007, 2008. After that, everybody became very risk adverse, very cautious after the whole kind of CDS market collapse. But what we're seeing now finally is also as well, if I could say this, putting the customer first. The next generation of users, they want a product that moves fast, works fast, is instant, is instantaneous, and they also want, to an extent, and this is where I really believe that predictive analytics is going to be a game changer from an AI perspective. They want to know what they need before they realize they need it. And that is where bringing the data and looking at behaviors of clients and understanding social demographics, the personal individual appetite and use cases of each client, looking at that individually, and then being able to predict actually based on comparative analysis with other users and with same background, social demographics, etc. We're expecting this individual to need XYZ products in the next 3 months, 12 months, 18 months. And that is going to be, for me, the game changer where fintechs are going to have, if I could say, at the upper hand, because the trade FIs, I believe in some instances, the traditional banking has left themselves too late. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of sexy front-end automation, but on the back end, there's still a hamster in the wheel running and paperwork flying all over the office. I'm excited for the fintechs, for the challenger banks, for the crypto firms, for the diversification we're seeing in the market. I am concerned for the future of TradeFi and what that means if the tier 1, tier 2 banks as we know them today don't get on the same page.
No, I love your comment. I think it's in essence completely right. Now, I have 3 comments to this one. Number 1 is the data solution are very much limited in today's time by data protection. Everybody is talking about like, you can do this now. Imagine if you take behavioral patterns and indicia into a data system, which of course makes it very good. And I was always a big defender on this one. Whenever I talked about KYC on a compliance side, I said to the guy in the front service, this information is helpful for you. You need to know when the company is sold because you can make money out of it. So it has a market value for you, what I'm asking for you to get into the data. But then it comes to data protection and this time, how far do we go? What is there? And I think this will be certainly a collusion of 2 spheres that we will still see for the next years going on, and they will be solutioned. And I know on what I would bet, moreover on the driver of innovation and AI than on the protector of data protection. 2 is, you mentioned in terms of the users, and I love it. My daughter is the best example. My daughter does not even know how banks looks from the inside because she does it all on Revolut and everybody else with even online verification, etc. Yeah. However, the silver foxes are back. Longevity plays as well a big element. And we saw, especially in the UK, that NatWest Bank, for instance, is now setting up mobile services to bring the bank to the home of the elderly customers. And honestly, unfortunately, even once you get accustomed to an iPhone and a smartphone, doesn't mean that 80 you have the same capability. So we see more and more as well people visiting at home in terms of doing the banking work at home. So it's a very interesting element that will play into the game. And the last but not least, I think ultimately the ultimate driver is what is relationship. Why I say that? In particular, we as a customer of a bank, we really want to have this kind of special relationship. Whenever you come into a plane and stewardess is talking to you with your first name and said, hey, Stephanie, hey, Ralph, wonderful that you're with us on the flight, you feel directly comfortable. And whatever we get in terms of, you mentioned it, sexy tools or sexy developments, this is not in the center of it in terms of how can I enhance the relationship and how can I really make this relationship more living. Yeah. Then that will be not an issue. And what is for me always the important thing is because at the time, roughly 4 or 5 years ago, we all knew that AI will be disruptive, differently than the internet. The internet was connecting people. AI and digitalization is disruptive because a lot, especially on our side, white collar guys or people will lose their jobs, which is differently in the industrialization in the 50s. So it's as well an interesting move at this hand. But especially in banking, and I'm talking now here more for the private banking, relationship management is still the most important thing. So whatever does not really serve your relationship, forget it in terms of tooling, technology enhancements.
Brilliant. I love what you said there. I absolutely love what you said. And it isn't just about, I know I've said the word sexy a few times as well. It isn't just about being sexy. It's about, sometimes it is just being boring. It is just looking at it in the most simplest way possible. I'm one of these people, and I still stand by it. We should be able to break our frameworks back down to their simplest forms. And to over-engineer is to create a noose for our own necks when it comes to even a regulatory inspection or an audit inspection, where I've seen organizations create super equivalent requirements for themselves, which they end up getting audited on because they have it in their policy or in their procedures. So and that's a whole discussion as well, a different discussion about regulation nowadays, where I believe that the way that we have over-regulated has I wouldn't say remove people's ability to think. People just don't think. They think that if you look at many AML, enterprise-wide risk assessments, for example, risk is the operative word here, but if you map it back to the very beginning and the foundation of how the risk assessment has been determined and evaluated, the foundation is based in regulation, not in the products, the clients, the geographic risk, industry risk, etc. And that scares me because it shows me a potential lack of understanding of products and services by the risk professionals within the organization. And so the question is, how are you creating a sustainable, forward-looking risk framework to support your organization if your starting point isn't actually your risk? Your starting point is a regulatory environment that is constantly evolving, and it's built very generalistic as well. And that kind of leads me on to my last question, which is probably a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I will ask it. We see many providers in the market selling products, which some of them, they have it in their roadmap, and I have no issue with that. But in some instances, they're selling AI products which are actually nothing more than advanced automation. And it's not easy for a lot of organizations to differentiate this because, again, in some instances, I wouldn't say clueless, they're not as educated or understanding of AI use cases as they are today. How are you ensuring that when you meet with clients that they're really, and this is maybe just specific to your organization, but how are you making sure that, one, the wool isn't being pulled over their eyes by other participants in the market? Secondly, that they're understanding, you mentioned earlier about a black box, that they're understanding the explainability of what they're actually going to get inside the product. And thirdly, I suppose, and most importantly, how that product is bespoke for their organization. And you talked earlier about boutique firms. What I've seen many instances is organizations buying named products off the shelf. And I actually heard of one instance, and this was many years ago, I say many, about 5 or 6 years ago, where the license fee, I think, was something around 250, 300K a year. But the bank itself had something around 3 million in its back pocket for ongoing yearly calibration of the product. And that, for me, just blew every type of whistle, and every red flag was raised, because clearly that tool, the due diligence on that tool hadn't been done by the right people. So getting the right people in the room to understand what it is that they need, understand what it is you're selling, understand how it's going to be continually supporting the future proofing of the organization. And I know I'm putting this all on you to answer this question, but I'm sure you've seen it in the market. There's a lot of people jumping on the AI bandwagon, and we're an industry built on integrity, and that's where we need to start. So I will fire it over to you for the easy answer.
Good. I love the question. I think you used a word that I think has got much forgotten. It's integrity. And is it not funny that in these kind of talks about AI digitalization, data, etc., the most common factor is always the human touch, meaning we talk about trust. And I think that would be my ultimate answer to it. You need to trust people. Now, my boss would say trust is nice, control is better. And I could tell you for the first element in terms of how do we know that there is really AI in when it's AI on the package? I don't know. Could I not say that sometimes like a placebo effect? At least it has an effect, and I feel better. It's good. No, I don't think so because you're right. Some market players are really polluting the market in terms of what they're producing, and people very often say, but I saw this advertisement. We have to have this one, and it's already more developed. And I feel it already. And I think what you need to do is invest time. And I always invite whenever we do a proof of concept or a request for pricing RFP processes, I always invite the guys, normally either a CEO and then somebody from the operational part, just to demonstrate it, what they have. So you need to invest time in terms of what it really looks like. And that already mentioned, as we mentioned both in the beginning, you have to have the right mindset about your existing data and the right vision where you want to go. If you have that, 70% is already done. The 30% is to go. Now, what I do and what has been very beneficial is always not only getting a referral by saying, hey, this or this bank has implemented it. I invite then the person himself. Normally it's a COO who says, yes, we have encountered exactly the same problem like you, and the solution was really fitting. So this is where you need to go. And I think you will already learn, or I have always seen, as you mentioned before, and you have the kind of big companies that one of them is starting with a sales word. They have super nice suits that seem to address every problem, but they're coming without content.
Yes.
So you need to find the roles. You need to calibrate it. And whatever happens, if you have a country change, you need to call them, cost you 10,000, 20,000, should just have one single element. So what I always look on this one is exactly what I mentioned, not only the buy-in fact at the beginning, but the maintenance. Who does it and what price it comes. So I think the best, what I can always give as a good suggestion is get yourself a referral of people and then to get with them into contact by asking them the same questions. That brings you already in this kind of storytelling and what you have seen before.
Apologies, I didn't realize that my camera had zoomed right in on me.
Very good. Very
It
good.
has one of these things where you can zoom
I
in,
love
zoom
it.
it out.
I love it.
And I was like thinking, like, what is this right? I just looked up and saw my face.
Your
right
world
in my
time has gone away.
It also follows me around the room sometimes, which is a bit
Perfect.
alarming. So last but not least, it would be really wonderful for you to talk a little bit just about, you know, very brief, very kind of, I wouldn't say briefly, but yourself and the organization. And obviously when we edit this, we'll pull it all back into like a more kind of, should I say, structured format. Also as well, some of the discussion points today, to be honest with you, they're absolutely, your responses have been fantastic, if I may say, Ralph. I would love, and Jane would love, to create like an article on the back of it, just with some sound bites or with some kind of takeaways, discussing the challenges of AI implementation and diversity of skill sets within organizations. All of this will be sent to you in advance for your review to make sure that you're comfortable with, obviously verbiage, branding, etc. But the conversation has been really interesting. So I just
Same
want to
on my
thank
side.
you.
It's very rare that you have a moderator that is really into it and really understands the mechanism of what it's behind, and so it becomes quite dynamic. Same I had. We invited last 2 weeks ago for our bank event 2 world-known skiers from Switzerland. And I was like, oh my God, who's the moderator? Because that's the most important thing. And she was the head of media of the Swiss skiers. So she knew them personally. And so the questions asked and the whole setup was perfectly well aligned because it was a well fit. And I think I felt the same with you in terms of your mindset and how you operate. It's exactly how I do. Sometimes take not everything very seriously and find the right balance between education and entertainment. So that is very good.
Well, no, I think for me, I hopefully it comes through. I absolutely love working in our industry, and I've been doing it now 20 plus years. And people say to me like, "How can you be so enthusiastic and upbeat?" Because it is bloody exciting what we do. Every day changes in terms of I learn something new every day. The minute I stop learning, I would then probably need to think, am I in the right field? But if anybody says to me that they work in compliance and it's boring, I very, very quickly have to ask, what are you actually doing? Because if you're doing a tick the box exercise, your framework's broken. It really is just an exciting job to be in. And there's so many wonderful, don't get me wrong, there's always a few idiots around, but there are so many wonderful people in our industry as well. I really want to see more cohesive support with regulators. I'm hoping that AMLA is going to do a lot of positive work. You mentioned data privacy earlier, and with Article 75 coming through, hopefully the previous headaches of the data privacy requirements created for investigations will be somewhat, should I say, reduced. But but we're it's not perfect. But this is where it's important that the regulators work with the industry, and we work with law enforcement and all respective bodies to continuously learn from one another. And even it goes back to like technology. As we mentioned earlier, what we're building today may not be suitable for tomorrow because of changes in typologies. And we need that constant feedback from, the people on the street, the law enforcement telling us what they're seeing. A few weeks ago, I was with some individuals from AMLA and also from the FIUs. And I asked, what's going to be the focus of AMLA? And they said, we're going to be focused on drugs. And I said, really? That's going to be our focus? And they said, yes. And I said, I get it that we have a number of, drug cartels, very complex networks operating within Europe. But our biggest pandemic is financial scams at the moment, impacting everybody. I always say this, you choose to take drugs, you don't choose to be scammed. And unfortunately, I think, we've had 30, 40, 50 years of trying to follow the money on drugs. And to be honest, it's not worked in terms of enforcement. In some instances, it's because we're scared to take enforcement against the individuals because of various reasons. But the general public's biggest impact at the moment, it's not the drugs, it is financial scams. And I think we need to show a little bit more that the regulators are in touch with the man on the street, the woman on the street, them on the street, to basically make sure that we're tackling and focusing on the right things. And AI use cases are going to be fundamentally important to grabbing all the data and quickly notifying financial institutions, hey, we see an emerging risk and you have that in your book. And for me, that's going to require a complete shift in bottom-up communication and data sharing from banks to FIUs, etc., but more top-down, where law enforcement, FIUs have got direct feeds into the financial system, and they're we're just moving at the speed of light, because the technology is moving at the speed of light, and the fraudsters will always be 2 steps ahead. So what I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself, which probably would have been really good in the beginning. Talk about who you are, your background, and your organization.
Perfect. Good. My name is Rolf Ebert. I am here Chief Compliance Officer of a very prestigious Swiss private bank. My life has been always professionally and privately remarked by creating impact, and therefore I choose compliance, and I see compliance as a business enabler, and as of today's time, not only the kind of risk guard in a company, but in terms of bringing the institution to the next level. I had the benefits of learning a lot during my 25 years career, worked in banks like Credit Suisse, which are not existing anymore, as well with regard to French banks and Swiss private banks. So the constant change is an element in our role, and the constant obstacle and challenges, whether it comes from a human perspective as well as from an AI technology perspective, needs to be integrated. So I think sometimes it's the right mindset that's very important. And I love a sentence from a friend of mine at Goldman Sachs who said, we hire for skills, we fire for attitude. And what does it mean is, in terms of, for me, compliance culture and cultural behavior, even in the bank and especially in compliance culture ultimately is what I strive for. And I see my success as a success always of teams. I was a big field hockey player in the German National League and as well for the German national team. So I always understood that team sport results are the results of a team. and therefore much more enabling. And I'm a big fan in my private life as well on personal growth. So when Simon Sinek is writing about the infinite game, I see compliance exactly in the same role. It's not winning a battle for getting shareholder part into it on one transaction. It's being in a role where the institution can go ahead despite risks, but taking as well good decision on this one. So in my book, when I did my high school, you will find that I wanted to be either an ambassador or a judge, and I have to say I combined both of it in one role as a compliance officer. So I'm never regret that element. And if still people are finding compliance is boring, then they should have a look on my YouTube channel, Compliance Coach, where I bring as well what, for instance, a Triumph 1200 Scrambler has, it's a motorcycle, has in common with compliance, or why there's always a Swiss banker in a James Bond film. And I think bringing sometimes these kind of opposites together, it's the element. And as you rightly mentioned, especially in times of AI and digitalization, keep it simple.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, I actually was just looking at quickly on your LinkedIn, excitement and compliance. I also worked at BIL for my sins.
Hello.
I actually was head of compliance and legal for them in Singapore during the MAS remediation. Then before this.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So I was Adrian Lerlenberger was there at the time. So, but that, and we were, he was in my dream last night randomly. Oh my goodness. Very
Law of
odd.
attraction.
What was he actually came to our wedding. The CEO, oh my goodness me, why can't I remember his name? He literally was in my dream last night. Now I'm remembering. I don't know why. But it was that was probably one of the biggest learning curves for me ever in my entire career. I went in to an organization where the compliance team, the audit team, the operations team, are not back office operations, but second line, all gone. And I was on my own, and the MAS were at the door, in the middle of an inspection, and basically, we were just told to basically pull out the entire framework and restart it from the beginning. And that was probably one of the most pressure. We'd 9 months to get it right. Otherwise, I won't put this in the podcast, but otherwise, the license would have been pulled. But we were one of 10 private banks in Singapore at the same time going through this. It was the hardest, but in reflection, one of the most incredible learning experiences I ever had in my career. But would I choose to do it again? If I could go back, of course I would do it again because I learned so much, but it was hard, really, really, really hard. And I saw you also at IndoSuisse. Actually, a friend of mine, Alan Dampier, was there in Hong Kong for a while. He passed away. I don't know if you know that, during COVID.
Nope.
I was quite surprised because I reached out to him and I didn't get a response, and I messaged his wife and I said, Alan and I both worked at HSBC together, so I reached out and I was like, to his wife, I said, "Where's Alan?" And she went, "Oh, don't you know?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize." It was very, very sudden. But there you go. It's a small world.
Absolutely. It's a big family. And that's always I always say, you always meet twice in life, in your professional and private life. So you better look out that the first one is a good one, so that you're looking forward for the second one, and that becomes not a nightmare. So even if I go sometimes not always in good terms, I always try to be nice, and I think that helps a lot. I have to say, it's like you, the most critical moments are the best ones, and I saw that, for instance, at Credit Suisse when we had the Arab Spring. I just joined Credit Suisse as global head pep desk, and 3 days later, literally 3 days later, the Arab Spring happened, and I was in front of the board of directors. Urs Rona looking at me and I was saying, "Ralph, what do we do with our pep relationship?" So I had literally 3 days to understand who we are, what we have, etc. It was a funny game, and the most striking was, like, everybody knew, or everybody was thinking that after that one, because we had to block a lot of accounts because of the kind of sanctions, especially against Egyptians, we thought we will lose a lot on this one. And the contrary took place, because we were dealing with these people face by face by saying, "Guys, we can do this we cannot do." And this is how you deal with people in crisis. For the personal life, it's a little bit the same. That will be always rewarding for the afterlife. And I think that is what was nobody expecting, only 10% left finally in terms of AUM. And that I would say, hey, here really you contributed to a business success of the bank. And that I think was with
Yes.
the element where I thought, if you go out, then you go out. And I think what people completely misunderstand is, if you look in terms of the development of compliance, compliance is very often called as the god of the banks. Why is it like that? Because we are in the pivotal central point of view, and we need always to develop ourselves to understand how the risk calibration is working, how our budgets are calculated, etc. So we have a common wisdom that we have to take because nobody gives it to us and delivers it on the plate. And of course, after 10, 15 years, you have a huge advantage because you understand of how the dots and pieces are working together and what is the impact. So I love it in the sense, and so I can really say that we are sitting a little bit in the powerhouse by saying, where people come first of all to us, we're saying, does it make sense?
Absolutely.
What's the risk? And then it becomes really interesting if you're not like perceived as, I need to pass by these kind of compliance heads. They are completely useless. They don't understand nothing. And as you mentioned rightly, there are unfortunately some of them still out there, which
Yes.
are good. But to a recent survey that I saw in Switzerland, 60% of the head of compliance are over 50s, meaning experience is as well coming back into the game, which is cool.
There was the gentleman in Singapore was Rito Eisenring. I think he's at Avaloq now in Zurich.
Yeah, exactly.
Such a great guy. So he came to, we're still really good friends. He's actually really good friends with my husband. So he came to our wedding a few years ago. But yeah, this is exactly what you said. Our industry is so small. My mother always said to me, treat others as you expect them to treat you, but also remember who you meet on the way up because you may need them on the way down. And I've always tried my best to treat people how I would expect to be treated. And it stood me in good stead fast, I have to admit, in the industry. And I'm really proud to be part of this industry as well, which is something I think we should all feel like our job, whether people realize it or not, it does make a difference. When it's done right, we ultimately are responsible for what I believe is protecting individuals, protecting those who don't necessarily have the ability to protect themselves.
Right.
We can't stop it, but we can also detect it, and we can help in some instances to protect. But so on that note, Ralph, I will let you get back to your daily day. I'm sure you've got a lot of stuff on your plate. This has been incredible. It's such a pleasure to meet you. And as you rightly said, like the amount of time I cross paths with people that I've worked with in the past, and it's 1 degree of separation. It happens all the time. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Frankfurt. It's going to be wonderful to catch up there in person. You will be in Frankfurt for the event, yep.
Yeah. I have already my slot, so it's good.
Oh, brilliant. Well, have a
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
day. See you in Frankfurt. Take
Bye.
care. Bye, bye,
Ciao.
bye.
Ciao.